Okay, creator, we're gonna sing. Way-ha!
The Maliseet people, also known as the Welastekwewiyik, which translates to the people of the beautiful river, have always lived around the St. John River up to the St. Laurent River in what is now known as New Brunswick, Quebec, and Maine.
So long ago there was a story about how the elders had moved. This is long ago when huge animals roamed the earth. And there were water dragons in our rivers. We call them, the name is Abudumpkin, the water dragon. Long ago, when this was how our world looked, our ancestors moved from a western area, eastern, towards the light, towards the sunrise.
The Maliseet origin stories describes the creator, who is an abstract being and does not directly interact with humans. Ktunuesk, which means Great Spirit in Maliseet language, is the name of the creator. The creator is rarely personified, and oral legends did not assign the creator a gender. While Ktunuesk created the entire world, the responsibility of maintaining and transforming the land is held by Glooscap, the cultural hero. The name Glooscap means man who came from nothing. He's also a warrior against evil and has magical powers that he uses to protect people. Glooscap was sent to Earth in a large stone canoe along with his evil twin Malzum. Glooscap created the animals from the earth. Back then, they were way larger than they are today. The beaver was as large as a bear. On the other hand, Malzum created the badger, who represents evil because of its aggressive behavior. Eventually, Glooscap killed Malzum. Glooscap created human beings. He shot 4 arrows at 4 different white-ash trees. And that is how the Passamaquoddy, Penobscot, Maliseet, and the Mi'kmaq peoples emerged. Glooscap taught them what to eat and what to gather until he had to leave. Before contact with Europeans, the Maliseets were hunters, fishers, and gatherers, but sometimes they also cultivated corn, beans, squash, and tobacco. Women would also pick nuts, berries, and fruits to supplement their diets.
L'hiver, nos quartiers d'hiver étaient à ce moment-là le fleuve Saint-Jean et nos quartiers d'été, la rive sud, près du fleuve, pour la pêche, la nourriture.
You know, there are stories about when you have your village, then the men would go away and hunt for months at a time. And so there are trees that are very tall that will have carvings of the hunters on them. And you climb at the top, they're probably trees that have their markings on them. I think it's so fascinating.
The Maliseet peoples lived in wigwams in walled villages. The Maliseet communities were governed by one or multiple chiefs who sat at a council that included representatives of each family. They were also members of the Wabanaki Confederacy, a group of Algonquian-speaking nations that were allies against the Five Nations Confederacy.
The Maliseets are from the Wabanaki, which means people of the white light or people of the dawn. Wabanaki. Waban is white light, and Aki is people of, so it's people of the white light. We have an artist, Ursula Bear, within the Tobic First Nations that recreated an ancient wampum belt that talks about that gathering of the 4 Penobscot, Passamaquoddy, Mi'kmaq, and Maliseet, that talks about that confederacy. So this would be a wampum belt.
The Maliseet and Passamaquoddy languages are very similar, with a couple differences in vocabulary, pronunciation, and accent. Thus, the languages are often referred as the Maliseet Passamaquoddy. When Europeans first arrived in North America, they would trade on the east coast with the Mi'kmaq, and the Mi'kmaq would trade with the Maliseet. Since the Maliseet lived inland, they had access to more fur, which is what the Europeans wanted. In 1608, Samuel de Champlain established a French colony where Quebec City currently stands. Jesuit missionaries started coming because they wanted to evangelize the indigenous peoples. They thought that their souls needed to be saved because they didn't believe in the same God. About 10 years later, huge waves of epidemics hit the indigenous peoples around it, including the Maliseet people. In the mid-1600s, the Jesuits Gabriel Duriet and Claude Dablon recall that on the sites where we would formerly count hundreds of wigwams, we barely see 5 or 6 now. Where we would see 300 to 400 canoes floating on the rivers, we now count 20 to 30 of them. The decimation of the indigenous populations on the land gave the opportunity for Europeans to expand their colonies. In the early 1800s, the logging industry was on the rise in Canada because England needed more wood to build their navy
Tous
ships.
les Maliseet ont déserté le territoire ancestral parce que nous étions des chasseurs-cueilleurs nomades et la déforestation, combinée à l'obligation des colons blancs de se nourrir, ils devaient cultiver la terre. Donc, ce faisant, ils ont créé des prairies et ils ont fait disparaître nos sources de nourriture qui étaient le gibier. On se nourrissait exclusivement de gibier, de poissons et de cueillettes. Donc, c'est ça qui a provoqué le diaspora des Maliseet.
In 1801, the government of New Brunswick reserved 16,000 acres of land around where the Tobique River and the St. John River meet. The land was reserved for the use of the Maliseet peoples, where Tobique First Nation currently stands. 26 years later, the government of Lower Canada also reserved a piece of land for the Maliseet people.
Et puis, on avait obtenu, en 1827, un territoire qui s'appelait la réserve de Vigée, qui est un territoire d'environ 3000 acres, qui avait été réservé, parce que c'était une terre de réserve, mais ce principe-là n'existait pas encore à ce moment-là, les réserves telles qu'on les connaît aujourd'hui. Et on a rétrocédé la réserve par un genre de référendum bidon. Et puis ces terres-là ont été revendues aux colons blancs pour qu'ils prennent de l'expansion. Il faut dire à l'époque, ces terres-là faisaient l'envie aussi des colons européens. Et ils disaient que les Maliseet ne s'en occupaient pas, négligeaient le défrichage, négligeaient leurs terres parce que l'automne, la pelle de la chasse était plus fort que tout. Donc, on y allait. On a perdu notre langue, notre spiritualité, notre culture, nos us et coutumes. On a perdu même un mode de vie complètement prématurément parce qu'on aurait pu le perpétuer jusqu'à aujourd'hui si on avait gardé des lieux communs, un espace pour communiquer et partager.
Well, for one thing, we were not allowed to use our language. And if you used our language still back in the late 60s, you were punished. This would be 1967, 68. So it was frowned upon to use your language. And even talking Maliseet in a hallway. And a lot of kids dropped out of school because, for one thing, they couldn't speak French. And then kids in grade 8, grade 9, by the time they reached grade 9, they would have dropped out. So the number of kids in high school, I think I started with 5. When I was the only graduate from that class in 1971.
Although the settler influence almost eliminated the Maliseet culture and language, today they're seeing a resurgence.
Il a réobtenu la reconnaissance de la nation Maliseet comme étant la 11e première nation du Québec en 1987.
After getting recognition from the government, the Maliseet de Vigée acquired this 200 feet by 200 feet reserve, the smallest one in Canada. All that resides on this is a single office building with 0 inhabitant living here.
Nous travaillons très fort pour essayer de reconquérir des terres et créer une activité, créer des activités tant économiques que culturelles pour redonner aux membres de la nation Maliseet, leur redonner le goût ou l'intérêt pour leur nation et pour leur culture, pour leur histoire. Ça, je pense que c'est bien important.
My name is Delbert Moulton. I'm from the Tobique First Nation. I teach at Southern Victoria High School in Perth, Andover. I teach grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, and grade 12. I also teach Native Studies to grade 12 and grade 11 students.
My name is Molly Brown. I'm from Tobique First Nation. I am a teacher at Perth Andover Middle School and I teach grades 6, 7, and 8. Maliseet language and culture.
Si on regarde, il y a peut-être 20 ans, nous étions peut-être 300-400. Aujourd'hui, nous sommes à 1650, proche 1700. Puis, je vous dirais presque une fois par mois, on a toujours quelques demandes de nouveaux membres, soit des gens qui ont retrouvé leur origine ou leur intérêt aussi, tout en sachant leur origine, leur intérêt à faire partie.
Well, this place wouldn't be here when I was younger. And, well, we had a school right up until grade 6. Then you had to go into town for middle and high school. And now, well, it's still the same thing, but at least kids are more accepted into the Hanover
Là,
schools.
présentement, on essaie modestement avec le programme, parce qu'il y a un programme qui existe qui s'appelle Ajout aux réserves, qui était plus sévère autrefois parce que on pouvait ajouter un morceau de terrain qu'on achetait d'une certaine façon avec nos propres revenus et qui touchait à la réserve, qui était adjacent. Maintenant, les règles ont été assouplies. Donc, on peut ajouter à la réserve un terrain qui est même séparé, mais à proximité.
As language is a key factor in Maliseet identity and culture, some elders at Toubik First Nation have been hosting weekly Maliseet language lessons for anyone interested. Some elders grew up speaking Maliseet but never learned how to write and are learning it now. Other adults know the language but are taking the class to refresh. Many want to learn to pass it on to the younger generation, who are even now using it on Facebook. The school in the neighboring town has recently introduced a Maliseet immersion program for members of the Toubik First Nation.
Yeah, and even our schools are incorporating it in our daily routines. Like, Oh Canada is in Maliseet, it's not in English. So almost every day it's in Maliseet. Well, it's self-identity too, just to know who you are and who you are as a person and where you come from, I guess. And that's the main problem with our kids too. They don't know who they are, who they belong to, and they come from different homes, and to have that sense of culture and language, it makes them feel proud, it makes them feel whole, I guess.
They're cultural keys of resilience for the Maliseets. They're also cultural keys for everybody on the face of this earth. That it begins with ourselves, who we are, and having that support around, and being part of something. And that's pretty much all there is. Only you can define you, and once you have defined you, then whatever anyone else feels or thinks is irrelevant. And that's how we build resilience. That's how we continue to maintain our culture. Because healing and true success does not happen until you know who you are, until you love yourself. Once you love yourself and you can define yourself, then a wonderful life begins. A healing journey begins. And our ancestors knew that. It is okay to be First Nations. It is okay to define yourself. It is okay to make a statement about who you are and how you want to live in this world.
Here with our First Nation, Toubik, education was always number one for the community, our elders and our parents. And it was always a thing for this First Nation to be educated. People really were supportive of students wanting to move on further.
In our First Nations community, there is no inequality between men and women. There is no inequality between children and men and women. All of us are a creation. There is no inequality between animals, a rock, the air, the river, or the sunlight. All has a significance and is part of the world. There is not a schematic way of looking at the world. We look at ceremony as being a very important part of a cleansing and being important part of who we are. And I found that over the years that it wasn't always there. Like in the 50s when I was born, there was still a wave in the air of, oh, you can't do that because the Catholic Church is not in favor of that.
So you gotta go with history, right?
Cette année, on a fait notre paroi annuel ici. On appelle ça, nous, la pointe de Kakuna. Donc, voyez-vous, le fleuve vient jusque-là. Ça, c'est à nous. Et puis, jusqu'à l'autre bord. C'est à nous. On a le fleuve des deux côtés, quand la marée est haute. On a fait notre paroi ici cette année. Tout s'est passé ici. On a eu 4000 personnes dans 2 jours.
Oh, wow.
Qui sont passés par ici. Ben, on essaye de collaborer avec nos voisins. On n'est pas des sauvages, finalement.
Unfortunately, we were not able to visit the Halton Bend in Maine, Madawaska, Woodstock, Kingsclear, Oromonto, or St. Mary's First Nations in New Brunswick, but we were able to have an over-the-phone discussion with Alan Polchies, the culture coordinator and Bound Council member in St. Mary's First Nation. When asked about efforts of resilience or resurgence, he had quite a lot to say. Alan told us about year-round efforts to revive their culture in a variety of culture programs, including the St. Thomas Co-host Maliseet Immersion Program, an effort to teach their original language to the new generation. Alan stated that the community holds an annual powwow with members of the community participating. Their community also has 3 sweat lodges, which operate year-round. Alan told us about hunting programs in the winter so that the community can revive the culture through the social practices of hunting. As settlers trying to learn about Indigenous peoples, this experience was very educational and changed our view on the world. In the process of doing this project, it was our first time encountering Maliseet people. We had the privilege to get to know who they are today and how the history and culture has shaped their communities. We have only encountered incredibly hospitable people, and we could see that in their communities, they support each other and those who are in need. We were blown away not only by their hospitality, but their sureness in their identity and the strength they receive from their knowledge of themselves as Maliseet peoples. We met people who knew who they are, knew their history, their culture, sometimes the language, and are not only comfortable in it, but are proud of it. In Kakuna with the Maliseet de Vigier, they were very nice to us and gave us presents, even though they were the ones sharing their knowledge with us. When we visited Tobique First Nation, we were strangers to them, and they gave us more food than we could eat, as well as a place to stay before they even knew our names. The values of the Maliseet people are important in the programs and facilities available, from youth programs, language lessons, and community dinners. Upon editing the footage for the video, we began to notice that a common theme was present. A shared sense of cultural identity, self-definition, and community was prevalent among the different Maliseet First Nations. The sureness in their identity gave them strength that doesn't trample on others, but rather built each other up because of their community. The opportunity to hear and to learn from them had us questioning our own selves as human beings and our values. The experience will never be forgotten and definitely made us better people in the world.